Hello. For this assignment I chose project number 4, and for the recommendations based on the theoretical concepts portion I'll be focusing on chapter 5, specifically some of the principles of behavioral learning. To begin, I will give you a brief cultural profile of the student. He is a white 5-year-old male. He lives in a small rural town in South Arkansas, less than about 230 people. His socioeconomic status is lower class. His religion is Christian. He's a member of the Southern Baptist Church in this town, although it is unknown to me how active he or his family is in church. He lives at home with his mother, father, grandmother, uncle, 2 sisters ages 12 and 14, and 1 brother who is 9. His siblings all attend the same school, and all of them have difficulties in school, both behavioral and learning. His mother is employed at a local gas station in town, and his father drives a truck, so he is gone for a week or so at a time, and then when he returns, he's just there for a couple of days before he leaves again. He is non-disabled, but he qualifies for both speech and occupational therapy. He has issues with fine motor control. He has a tic where he clears his throat constantly. He also has many sensory issues. A lot of oral sensory seeking behavior, other sensory seeking, and he's overloaded very easily. He does not have any diagnosis, so he does not have an IEP or a 504. He was enrolled in the HIPPY and pre-K programs available in this town and has received speech and OT services since he was about 3.5 years old. Early intervention has served him well because he is above many of his kindergarten peers as far as letter recognition and sounds, colors, counting, and so forth. So moving on, I'll describe some of the issues that we have with this student. He's very hyperactive. He has difficulty staying in his seat, waiting in line, walking instead of running down the hall, and keeping his hands to himself is a big challenge for him. He's very sloppy and uncaring when doing his work, even though he is very capable. He has trouble following directions and completing tasks. On his more difficult days, he can be somewhat non-compliant and will also destroy his personal property, such as his pencils, crayons, glue sticks, but he does limit it to his property only. He's not been destructive to anything in the classroom or at the school. He has been known to cut holes in his clothes if he's not carefully monitored with his scissors. Now, as far as specific recommendations for providing support for the student's behavior issues, we've done quite a number of different things. We've moved him to an individual desk just to kind of avoid some of the issues that he was having with his peers. So he's not at the table with them. So at his desk he has a wobble stool that we borrowed from OT, and this allows him to kind of wiggle in his seat but not necessarily be disruptive to his peers. He also is allowed what we call movement breaks, where if he's getting anxious or he's finished with his work, he can get up and walk in designated areas of the classroom just to get some of that energy out. In addition to this, we created a tactile center, and we use this more of as a reward basis for him. So he often finishes his work before the rest of the class, and if he does, he's allowed to go over to his center and play quietly. We've done quite a bit of role play with him to demonstrate appropriate behaviors for things such as standing in line at the water fountain, waiting on the wall during bathroom breaks, and proper cafeteria behavior. We have found that rewards work best for this student as opposed to any type of punishment. The entire school uses an app, and it's called Class Dojo, where the teacher gives points for making good choices and good behavior, and then takes away points for poor choices. Keeps a running total of their points. The parents can download the app and they can monitor it, so forth. The theory is fantastic. However, with this student, he really wasn't grasping the concept. The points didn't really mean anything to him, so we thought it would be better if it was something that he could see and touch right there in the classroom in front of him. So we created a color-coded chart with a clothespin on it, and he moves that clothespin, and it kind of corresponds with the dojo points. So the teacher's allowed to load the points, but he sees it as a color that he's on. For example, he starts every day on green. If he runs down the hallway, he'll have to go into the classroom, pull his clothespin from green, and move it down to yellow. Later in the day, he, say, cleans up his area around his desk without being prompted. We may reward him by saying you can go move it from yellow to green. So if he remains on green for the week, he'll be allowed to get a treat from the treasure box. So moving on to recommendations based on theoretical concepts. Like I said, for this portion, I'm focusing on Chapter 5 and specifically on some of the principles of behavioral learning. for this particular child, there has been a lot of trial and error as far as figuring out what things motivate him to want to make good choices and what things don't affect him at all. We found, like I said, for this student, that reinforcers work best for strengthening good behavior and keeping him focused on making good choices. Certain types of punishment, on the other hand, like having to go see the principal, almost seemed to derail him more off course, make him very agitated, and then hard for him to reset almost. So we had to do that twice at the very beginning of the school year, and while the principal did nothing but just, kind of a stern talking to with the student, it did not change or reduce his behavior. Like I said, it almost made it worse. So we knew we had to come up with a different game plan. So that new game plan consists of a lot of positive reinforcers. We found that social reinforcers do work quite well for him for the small things. For example, if I notice that he's waiting patiently in line at the water fountain, which we know is a struggle for him, I'll go over and tell him how proud I am of him, give him a big high five, or he loves bear hugs. He's a seeker, so he loves the big bear hugs. Another type of secondary reinforcer that works well with him is activity reinforcers. When he has a particularly good day, and for him that would be if he ends with his clothespin on anything above green, so purple, pink, and blue. He's rewarded at the end of the day with about 10 minutes of a fun activity of his choice. So with this student, I find myself using the PREMAC principle quite often. For example, at the beginning of the school year, he would rush to finish his work. It was sloppy. He would scribble all over it, wouldn't stay within the lines with coloring. You couldn't read his name. But I noticed that when he wanted to, he could write fairly legibly. He could color within the lines to an extent. He could cut along lines if he needed to. He was very capable of doing better work than what he was turning in. So now I'll tell him, listen, if you finish your work and you try your absolute best, when you get done, you can go over and get your Play-Doh out of your center and you can bring it to your desk or your table until the rest of the class gets done. So this reinforcement principle has worked very well on him. Now, instead of trying to rush through it, he tries to do it right the first time, even asks for help, instead of just rushing to get it done and turn something in. So obviously there are times that call for punishment. Removal punishment has worked best for him. For example, if he tries to get loud and disruptive in the class while he's supposed to be playing quietly in his center, he'll lose that privilege, say, for the rest of the morning. Or we give him a block of time. It's not, we don't pull something for the entire day. Response cost is another type of punishment that we've used for him. He has a very hard time sitting and behaving appropriately in the cafeteria. A lot of noise and stimulation, it kind of puts him into overload. When reinforcers don't work, to get him to make better choices in the cafeteria, he'll end up having to walk on the sidewalk at recess, which is immediately after lunch, for a set number of times, instead of swinging, say, which is his favorite activity. So in conclusion, as I mentioned earlier, finding ways to encourage good behavior for the student has been a real challenge, and there's been a lot of trial and error, but I think to some degree that's probably with all students. Teachers need to take the time to get to know their students, where they come from, their background, what challenges they face, and really find out what motivates each individual student. What works for some may not work for others, and that's okay. But it's so important to try new things and find out what works. For this particular student, I think he's been very blessed with a teacher. I'm just the aide in the classroom, but his teacher has been so willing to try new things to get him to help to be successful and just to feel good about himself and his accomplishments. And I do feel that with another teacher, he could have very easily just been labeled a behavioral issue or a troublemaker, and just been passed over. So that concludes my video. Thank you very much.